Hi, I'm Kenneth, and today I'm here with Stephanie. Stephanie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie, and I am currently a software engineer at PayPal, and I'm also a founder of The Road to Tech.
And with regards to your background on the road to tech, you've helped other people with career transitions. It's a tough job market right now, especially in the tech industry, with announcements of layoffs ongoing for the past year or so. Do you have any general advice for people that may have been part of layoffs or restructuring process and are now in this somewhat challenging environment?
Yeah, I think what's very interesting is that as I have personally been able to transition into software engineering without having to go to boot camp or a CS degree, what that looks like, what that looked like 3 years ago when I got into tech in 2020 is very different than how I would recommend people to get into tech now. I've also been doing career coaching for over the last 3 years, advising and mentoring people to get into tech. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of companies are being pickier. There's less funding right now in the tech industry. There's a lot of layoffs from the big tech companies. So what a lot of companies now are doing is that they now have the ability to be really picky about like who they want to hire. And so that means that a lot of companies they're preferring candidates who already have domain knowledge in what they are already building. So let's say that, and this is a true story. So let's say that you are somebody who worked at KPMG. This happened with a past mentee of mine, and she had worked there, I believe, as like a tax consultant or tax advisor. And then she decided she really wanted to be a software engineer instead. So she was able to leverage her background in that like tax auditing world and be able to land a job at a tax software company. Very similarly, I had worked with somebody else a few years back, and she was a preschool teacher in the Bay Area. Went to a coding boot camp, was having trouble finding a job until a position in a ed tech company came up, and so then she was able to get into that space as both like a software engineer and somebody who was an educator. So I would say like leveraging the domain knowledge, and then also to not quit the job if they can, and try to transition within a company instead, because that's going to be a lot simpler than trying to go out there and apply and compete against like hundreds if not thousands of other candidates.
Got it. So what I'm hearing from you is either stay within an organization, or if you encounter a layoff, try to find something with something similar to previous domains that you are a part of.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you've also um, are a software engineer yourself. Um, can you give a little bit of background into how you came about this yourself?
Sure. So, how I landed on software engineering, specifically on iOS, is that when I had quit my first job in manufacturing, I was exploring different career paths, and then it just so happened that, at that time, I was dating somebody who worked in tech, and coming from South Carolina and then moving to California, I had never met anybody who worked in tech before. The most I knew about tech was that Apple and Google existed, and I used those on a semi-regular basis. And then so he introduced me to some product managers. I was able to learn from them what are different kind of roles there are within tech, and maybe how can I leverage some of the soft skills that I built up while I was working in manufacturing as a production supervisor. So originally, I was trying to pursue product management via learning UX UI design. I'm just gonna say, like, it's really difficult to find a job when you're unemployed, especially in California when there's just a lot of competition. And so I ended up going back to manufacturing. Had some other life happenings. So I was like laid off like two times after that, and then that's when I decided like let me try to teach myself how to code, because I realized like I enjoyed designing mobile apps more than I do web apps. But at the same time, like I didn't want to be a UX UI designer. I thought that that sort of role would be too stale for me, and I wanted to be able to code my creations and see them actually come to life. Because at that time in 2018, the prototyping tools out there were not very advanced. Yeah, Figma. I don't even know if I'd used Figma at the time. I was using like InVision and Sketch. Yeah, so then I decided to teach myself how to code. And thankfully, I had a really good friend who I had met a few years back at a hackathon, and he offered to mentor me because he was also completely self taught. So having a mentor is really, really important. Like that's really like how I was able to push myself to get to the next step without thinking that I need to complete a whole course and having to go to a coding boot camp. Um, of course, like the part where me landing a job was really like all on my own, because he had gotten a job 5 years back. So that I think he became an iOS developer himself in like um, 2013, 2014. So I always tell people like every year you are applying for jobs, especially within tech, it's going to be changing all the time. So the advice that you get from somebody even 3 years ago, 2 years ago, might not even be relevant to today. So I figured a lot of that out on my own. Was found by a manager at PayPal, and she had the technical recruiter reach out to me, and then starting the hiring process.
Awesome. And with that note on the environment is always different in tech, and some of the advice from the past may no longer be relevant in this exact current environment. Outside of anything you said before, is there any things that you would kind of give people for like a final advice note about this current environment? And then we'll move
Yeah.
on to the next topic. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So what I've been seeing is that you really need to leverage your network. And I know like everybody says this, but here's like my tips for people who are trying to make that career shift. And this is also helpful for those who got laid off. Maybe you're having a lot of trouble finding that next job, even if you're not making career shifts. So I think the number one thing that everyone forgets about is LinkedIn. But it's not just optimizing the profile. It's a lot more than having a profile picture and then like adding in experiences and things like that. But what I realized when I was looking for my own first job in tech was that LinkedIn is just a giant algorithm. It's pretty similar to Google SEO in that you need certain keywords on your profile in order to push your profile up for the keywords that hiring managers and recruiters are searching for. But if you have other keywords other than the job that you're searching for, then you might not actually get shown. Or even if you get shown and someone clicks on your profile, the recruiter might get confused about whether or not you're serious about pursuing X, Y, and Z. So then you actually have to remove those type of keywords and search terms from your profile. So an example is that I'm on Twitter a lot, and there was one time I saw this lady. She had worked. I don't know if she was like a lawyer or she was like a legal assistant, but she had worked in a law firm for a long time, and she was transitioning into tech. And then she said like she wasn't getting any hits, she wasn't getting any interviews, and then so when I inquired like, what does your LinkedIn search tell you? And she says that she was often seeing jobs related to legal, and then she wasn't seeing any software engineering roles. Um, LinkedIn actually publishes a free report every week that people ignore, and it's under like LinkedIn Analytics. So it's going to show you how you show up in search. And so that is actually the key that I discovered when I was trying to transition into tech. And I figured out like, oh, if I use this as my anchor point to figure out whether or not I have the right keywords, in order to have my profile show up to the right people, then maybe I can actually leverage this in order to find a job without referrals. So then going into referrals another big one, right? Everybody talks about referrals, but nobody really talks about how to approach referrals. I find that most professionals, um, they do not want to refer someone unless they personally know them. I've heard of horror stories from people who refer strangers just because they want the quick referral bonus, and then it bites in the butt later on. So the way to go about it, I think, is obviously like building professional relationship. But what is like professional relationship, right? For me, it has worked well in where I'm very sociable, even though I'm an introvert, hence INTJ. But I'm a very sociable person, and I do like to make connections. And so my approach has been really kind of like becoming friends with somebody. And if they need help somewhere, if they see that maybe they are looking for a job on LinkedIn, or um, they want support on their business, I'm there to help them out in that sort of way. It's kind of like indirect way, right? So that's kind of like how my approach is kind of just be like that good friend that you would want. And then slowly over time, this is really like a long-term game, but like over time, maybe they will see like an opportunity that has a really good fit for you. And then they'll reach out and be like, hey, Stephanie, I'd love to introduce you to this person. Or, hey, I know that you're interested in this type of role. This is like an opening at my company. Let me help you out. So those are my key tips: is utilizing like LinkedIn, and then referrals, and trying to move internally in your own company.
Got it. And for this next portion, wanted to ask you some questions about personal organization and planning strategies. Uh, are there any tools that you use personally to kind of organize your days and weeks? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question because I have seen so many productivity videos out there. There's only been like a few tips out there that has really worked for me. So I've tried everything from like bullet journaling, digital, like using digital planners, all sorts of different things. I've tried it all out there. And also because I'm a software engineer and product focused person, I love trying out new apps and software. But what has really stuck with me over the past few years is utilizing my Google Calendar. And a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually create sub calendars within your Google Calendar. And you can label each one by a specific name and by color. So because I'm very color oriented, and I sometimes I'll forget appointments and meetings and things like that. So I have to make sure that I categorize everything under specific calendar name and the color as soon as I know about it. So, even for our meeting today, like as soon as you told me, I put it on my calendar. So I make sure like I block off that particular time and I don't have any overlapping meetings. So every Sunday, I go through both my work calendar and personal calendar, make sure that they are in sync. And yeah, so that's really like how I'm able to organize my days. And then I do find that writing down tasks is really important, whether it's on paper, like post-it notes, or putting it on like Apple Notes is really, really important. And then other organization um, organization thing that I do is that I heavily use the Apple Notes app. I have tried other notes app out there. And I would say that the Apple one works the best for me because if I need to take notes in a meeting, I can quickly just hit like Command Space and then quickly pull up notes. Whereas something like Notion, I found that it's better for SOPs, standard operating procedures, and writing um, uh, procedures, or planning plans or study notes is better on Notion. But for notes, I keep everything organized in folders. I definitely have at least like 1,000 notes by now, but they're all organized in different folders. So I'm able to search for them in the future. So those are my main tips on like how I stay organized.
So it sounds like you use notes a lot. I use it probably less than you, but I still use it.
Mhm.
Do you have any system or advice in terms of organizing them by like titles? Is it primarily by like subjects? Do you add dates to them? I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah. So for my notes, because I do take a lot of notes because for whatever reason, sometimes I forget things pretty easily. I'm sure like a lot of people suffer from this. Yeah. And so what I end up doing is that when I do take notes, they're always digital because that way it's easier for me to find. Now I know that people that I work with and also clients, a lot of them actually prefer to take handwritten notes. So whatever works for someone, but I have like terrible handwriting, and I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't be able to understand what I wrote anyway if I hand wrote them. So I do find digital notes to be a lot more efficient for me. And then also I categorize by folder. So if I know a meeting is going to be about a specific topic, maybe I'm working on a particular project at work, then I have a folder for that project. And then so all meetings are going to go under there. And then I usually will write down like who I'm meeting with. And Apple already captures the date, but sometimes if there's no meeting topic or I just really need to jot down like a quick note from like different meetings of the day, and then I actually just write out like the date. Um, and so that tends to help me a lot. And I think staying organized is it's not perfect, and it really needs to cater to yourself and how your brain works. Because somebody who is neurodivergent needs a different system that's flexible than somebody who is neurotypical. And a
Got
lot
it.
of the advice on YouTube is for neurotypical people. So yeah.
Okay, so it's not relevant for a solid portion of the population, possibly.
Yeah, well, I think like it's important to try them all out, right?
Mhm.
Because it might actually work for somebody who is neurodivergent. But for anybody watching who is neurodivergent, you're wondering like why is it that you're trying all this advice from YouTube that's not working for you? Well, maybe try something a little different from people who have the same type of brain as you do.
Got it. That's great advice. And this seems silly because I've used Apple Notes for so long, but I wasn't even aware of folders before you mentioned it just now.
Oh no. I know. Oh man, your notes must be yeah, there must be a lot in there.
So I'll definitely be implementing the folders.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you learn as you go, right? Like
Yeah.
the whole Google Calendar and categorizing all your events, appointments, even like social events under sub calendars. That I actually learned from somebody on YouTube, and I'm very sure she's not neurodivergent, and
Mhm.
it's worked really well for me. I think the main thing is about just finding what works for you and then trying to stick to it for a bit, because it does become like a new habit that you have to relearn. And then if you keep switching to like different um, ways to keep track of your life, then yeah, it can cause some confusion. But yeah, whatever works for somebody.
All right. Thank you for your time, and we'll be wrapping this up. Bye.
Awesome. See ya. Thank you. Bye.